Why the negative stigma behind a plant?
Man, there's a huge history to uncover about cannabis prohibition in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
One name that sticks out in a huge way is Harry Anslinger. I don't
Mm.
know if you've ever heard of
Mm-mm.
this gentleman. It's even rough to call him a gentleman. I'm just being respectful right now.
Go in
But in
depth.
the early 1930s, Harry Anslinger became the commissioner for the Federal Bureau of Narcotics at the time, and throughout his career, which is funny because he was so hypocritical. Before he even started his career, he never spoke negatively about cannabis. It was
Mm.
part of our everyday culture, spanning back hundreds and thousands of years. Humans have always had a positive, connection and a relationship as a dietary supplement with
Mm.
cannabis. It was always used as medicine, but it wasn't until he became commissioner and he had sort of something to prove. At that time, um, alcohol prohibition had
Mm.
now ended, so that he didn't couldn't do anything with that, and so he discovered, you know, let's go after cannabis. That was a way for him
Ooh.
to find a target
Okay.
to sort of build this enemy number one around
Mm.
to that would be
Fear.
the highlight of his career. Let's make cannabis illegal.
Mm.
Let's scare the crap out of people and tell everyone that they're gonna die if they use it or go crazy and murder their family. And
The reefer madness, right?
yeah, the reefer madness, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so that kind of went on for about 30 to 40 years during his career. I think it
Wow.
was in that
Yeah.
position between 1930 and late 60s, I want to say 67. And some of the tactics he used were both fear-mongering, like spreading propaganda that wasn't true.
Hmm.
At the time, racist rhetoric was not hard to get behind because of the history in our country.
Mm.
There was a huge influx of Mexican immigrants actually in the 1900s who were trying to escape the political, happenings in their own country. And for better or worse, Mexican Americans were the first group of people who really came over into the country, and they were the first ones kind of using cannabis recreationally, and they kind of introduced this word marijuana.
Ah.
And Harry Anslinger very carefully used that phrasing, changed the H into a J to make it more American, and he started calling it marijuana.
Marijuana.
And
What we know
they,
today.
They attached a sort of this whole campaign of reefer madness around it and spread a lot of really bad lies. A aide to Nixon, Ehrlichman, John Ehrlichman, I believe is his name. He had a radio interview with a journalist, I think it was in 1994, and he came out and straight out said, during the Nixon administration, we had two enemies.
Oh.
That was the anti-war left and the blacks.
Mm.
And using cannabis and creating the war on drugs was a way to go after both of those enemies
Like a
at the time of the
scapegoat somewhat.
administration.
Ah.
It would give them access to raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them on the evening news night after night. And that was the sole purpose of what kicked off this sort of war on drugs and prohibition and the stigma that we now.
That's
it's
rough.
still, and it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because for thousands of years,
Mhm.
it was never seen as a negative thing. And all of a sudden, in a span of literally under a century, just destroying some history,
Yeah.
spreading these lies.
Yeah.
Up until today, we're still trying to fight off that stigma. Calvin Johnson, who used to play on the Lions, I know
Lions,
he's
Megatron.
a very he's
Yeah,
a
Megatron.
very big advocate. He actually
Really?
personally donated money to Harvard University to do a study on the connection of cannabis and recovery, and specifically CTE, because I don't know if you know, but 99%, I think it was 98 or 99% of brains that have been researched from ex-football players, ex-professional football players, about 98 to 99% of them do have CTE. And that is an
Brain
astonishing number. Yeah, taking those hits. And I know that
Year
over the
after
years,
year.
the NFL has stepped up their game with creating safety precautions
Mm-hmm.
and creating better gear and helmets and certain rules to mitigate that. But at the end of the day,
Your
you
body's
also
still
need to
going through
take
some-
preventative measures, and you can't just dope a player up to the point where they're numb and then expect them to perform at a certain level, have no side effects with irritation or depression.
Yeah.
And another big thing of CTA and repeated brain trauma is it can have very negative side effects. A lot of these players even take their own lives. They
Absolutely, absolutely.
end up becoming irritable and
Hmm.
be getting involved in violent
it,
crimes.
it, it
And
in a weird way changes the plasticity of the brain. You change,
yep,
your CPU, and a lot of professional, not only in football, but a lot of people are speaking out. So to me, it's highly beneficial because me being in the fitness world, that
absolutely.
negative stigma was always you stay away from that. If you're going to be a professional, if you want to succeed in lungs, and no, you stay away from that. That is bad. No, there that I kind of felt we've been lied to. A lot of my NFL stars that I grew up watching and loving, they're advocates, and
Yeah.
it's not for recreational. They're doing it to save their muscles, their careers, their lives.
I now wholeheartedly believe that within our lifetime, we'll definitely see federal legalization. I mean, the latest polls show that over 51% of our
Hmm.
U.S. population supports and agrees that cannabis should not be illegal on a federal level anymore.
Mm.
Many states have followed suit. Illinois was the 11th state to follow on recreational. I think we have, last time I checked, I think it was like 30 states
Mm.
who have medicinal programs rolling out
Awesome.
in the state.
Awesome.
So that's a huge amount of process.
Yeah.
The question is, at one point when all 50 states have like medical marijuana programs on a state level, does the federal government and Congress finally make a decision that we need to write this into law and make a
Yeah.
change?
Yeah.
I think a
Crazy
big
times
part
we
of
live
it,
in.
yeah, I think it's just that there's a lot of red tape there, and
Mm.
it's a process. You can't just flip a switch and walk into a room and say this isn't legal anymore.
Yeah.
You need to really think this out, and it's going to take some time and the right group of politicians working for the community and listening to advocates like ourselves to speak our minds and help make that change as a community.
And can you touch base on cancer and cannabis?
Absolutely. Like anything else, I am a very scientific person, and until I see hard scientific proof,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to claim that cannabis cures cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that we do know 100% is that cannabis absolutely helps with the quality of life.
Mm.
And a lot of those symptoms that you associate with cancer and going through chemotherapy. And to me, that if you're already in the final stages of a terminal illness and you're going through this rough treatment like chemotherapy and your body's breaking apart where you literally can't hold
Mhm.
food down and you're nauseous all the time and you're vomiting, it is proven to help with nausea,
Mm.
to build your appetite, to
Mm.
recover.
Mm.
I've seen amazing anecdotal evidence through people that I know and through, if you even like search videos online, you see these videos of, these kids with seizures or
Mhm.
someone with cancer who just went through chemotherapy where on a regular day they're zonked out and can't even
Yeah.
function. But then you give them a little bit of cannabis and they have an appetite again. They have a will of life. And at the end of the day, if you can improve someone's quality of life at that stage in their life, I mean, what harm
That's
are they
huge.
doing?
There's no harm if you improve someone's quality of life. If you're at the end stages of, heaven
Yeah.
forbid, something happens to you.
At the end of the day, I see
Man.
that as a freedom, and to me, that's unfair for the government to rip that away from you and say you can't have that quality of life
That's another
because of unfair
podcast.
policy. Yeah.
Jeez. Because
Here in Illinois, there's only one mental illness that's listed as a qualifying illness for medical patients, and that's
Really?
PTSD.
really, okay.
So there is no, you don't qualify as a patient if you just have depression or anxiety or insomnia, which are some of the biggest benefits that cannabis gives you. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of support from our community and speaking out to our lawmakers to really advocate for those kinds of changes, because I think it is beneficial. People often jump to like cancer or think that you need to have Crohn's disease or fibromyalgia or this terrible disease to enjoy the benefits of cannabis, and that just is not true. Even enjoy
Powerful, man. It's
the
powerful
quality
stuff.
of people sweep under the rug how important quality of life is. If you're not getting proper sleep, if you're not able to rest your mind, if you're constantly anxious, if you're constantly depressed, those can have huge impacts on your health in the long run and even in the short term.